Hi everyone, you are joining with the first video of Tech Talks. Today we are going to discuss a very important field called SAP systems, specifically for engineers and supply chain, logistics and transport operations, those areas. If you are a professional, this video would be an introductory video for your knowledge and your future endeavors. Today, to discuss this important topic, I have one of the experts in SAP systems. He's Dr. Nilas Pereira from the Department of Transports and Logistics Management at the University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. He's a senior lecturer attached to University of Moratuwa. So I warmly welcome Dr. Nilas Pereira to our discussion.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Right. So let's start the discussion. As a beginning for our discussion, I would like to ask from Dr. Nilas about an introduction to SAP systems. What is actually a SAP system is called?
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction and inviting me for this talk. So I think SAP is something that has become very much in line with the future, and the current and the future business practices. So I have prepared a few slides and I'll just take you through these things. So this was a company that started actually in 1970s. So originally what was happening was there was a set of engineers who were attached to IBM. And IBM took over some of the business process development and database development activities that were done at Xerox. And after a certain while, IBM realized that they didn't really want to continue this. They wanted to sort of get rid of that team, and they wanted to discard that project and move the useful resources elsewhere. But the engineers, the German engineers who were involved in this project, they saw that they could make this work. They felt there was a use case. They felt that they can make a significant impact to the world. So these 5 engineers, I have a photo of these 5 engineers: Hasso Plattner, Klaus Schierer, Klaus Wellenreuther, Dietmar Hopp, who's the most famous out of all 5 engineers, and then Hans Werner Hector. So all of these 5 gentlemen decided they don't want to discontinue the project. They wanted to continue it. And instead of agreeing with IBM, who was the original employer rather, they wanted to branch out and take that solution with them and develop it on their own. So that's how the story of SAP started. So initially, the name that they gave this, it was in German. They gave a System Analyse und Program Entwicklung. So that was the original name that they gave, and that literally translates to English as System Analysis and Program Development. So that's how the 3 letters SAP came into being. So using this same technology platform that IBM developed, they continued to make it much more robust and user-friendly. User-friendly in the sense not being very attractive to the eye, but being a good solution for businesses. And what they managed to do when they started in 1972, they were having a very small team. They were operating as a small unit, but after a few short improvements and some marketing, they were able to land Imperial Chemical Industries, ICI, which is a famous company, I think, working in your area of chemical engineering. So they managed to land a contract with ICI in UK to implement SAP. So originally, these people are from the southern part of Germany, from this area in Baden-Württemberg province, or state rather. And they started their journey with very humble beginning. So this is a very small company at the very beginning. It was not a large company that was having a lot of money or a lot of resources or a lot of engineers. It was basically an enterprise that was started by 5 very confident engineers who thought that they had a product to sell to the industry. So I hope that gives you a good introduction about the company.
Yes, of course. So we learned what is actually this abbreviation SAP, what is the meaning of that and the origin and how it was started. So it has no long history, like within 50 years. So, but nowadays we can see in manufacturing industry and related other industries, the SAP systems is very popular, and it has become having a SAP system has become one key feature for the sustainability and further development of the industries. So I would like to know from you, in professional point of view, what is the real function of SOPs in the industry? I mean, it's better if you could explain through an example when you are explaining. I think that will be very useful for our audience to understand, for any beginner who is not having a proper idea about the SAP systems, how they function in the industry. So I hope you can give a very nice introduction about that also.
Okay, so I'll try my best to explain it. So, I mean, just to add to what you said, SAP, as you mentioned, is used by a lot of companies. So, over 180 countries. So you can see it's a global brand. It's not just localized to one or two particular countries or regions. It's international. And then on the other hand, they have over 425,000 customers. So these are all big companies, and most of these multinational companies that are operating in multiple fields use SAP. And there's this stock exchange called Euro Stoxx 50, which only lists the top 50 companies in Europe. And SAP is one of those companies in that top 50. And within a span of 50 years, this company has become one of the world's third largest independent software providers. So I think this just adds to what you also mentioned, as well as my previous slide, about how successful these people have become over a very short period of time, despite not being a product that is made for mass customers. So most of the big software companies that we know of, like Microsoft, it's made for the personal user, but this is made for the business user. So that is one of the unique things about it. And also one of the, I mean, they have a lot of different solutions, but their main core is enterprise resource planning. And this is basically a business management software, which usually, I mean, allows the entire gamut of operations within an organization to be brought together. So you collect, store, and manage data and use it for interpretation as well. And it can be like production activities, human resource activities, supply chain activities. It can be something like the finance side. So I will share those nitty-gritties in a little bit, but generally the enterprise resource planning is something that encompasses the entire organizational structure and their business operations. Now, this is not a virgin space for SAP. There are many other companies that compete there. The most famous out of them is Oracle. And of course, Microsoft has its own solution in Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. And in Sri Lanka, IFS is very famous. It's based out of Sweden, and there are lots of customers for them as well. And there are a few other similar enterprise resource planning software providers. But SAP has emerged as the market leader. And any big company, especially who are focused on achieving very good results, based on statistics, they seem to be willing to go with SAP more than the others, because SAP is obviously the market leader there. Now, what is happening in this industry in ERPs, and especially in SAP, is what we call a three-layer structure. So there's a three-layer architecture. So there is the presentation side, the GUI, the graphical user interface. So we just see that from the top layer, where we see the computers, the network, the clients who will be logging in, and nowadays there is even the capability to log in through the mobile phone or through a tablet. Especially over the last 10 years, SAP has been very keen on bringing in this mobile platform and the tablet-based platform, because in some of these production and logistics activities, it's easier to carry a tablet and put in the numbers. And then on the second layer, you have the application servers, where you have the servers and the data, data servers which are supporting the GUI. And at the back end, you have the database. So now what SAP has started to do was, initially it was basically physical databases which were located at the client itself. So if a client organization installed SAP, they had to basically go along with a database. But now the preferred solution method is to have a cloud database. So they will buy space from somewhere else, and that will be the database that they will be using. So they need to have really good internet connection for that. Now, one of the important things you get out of this is, of course, SAP allows you to standardize the process. It allows integration of business of different functions. And it also allows the system perspective. So most of the time, we don't get that systems perspective from just looking at an organization from a manual perspective. So this ERP solution allows to integrate that system perspective of different functions. And obviously, it improves the quality of information and creates transparency. The data is owned by your own organization. And one of the biggest impacts that it makes is it reduces document flow. to that, there's sustainability for the organization and cost saving. And as an extension, of course, that leads you to online reporting. So these are some of these benefits that are there. Now, I mean, in the SAP platform, they have key areas. So they have what we call functions that are there. So in the middle, what we have is the programming platform. Where people have to do the coding. These are for IT engineers, computer science engineers who will look at the structure, the architecture, the data flow, and coding of this. But from a functional perspective, we will have several functional silos. So these are mostly, I mean, there are two major definitions that is defining this. That is the logistics side and the finance and accounting side. So under them, there will be different functions. For example, if you take production, especially most of the engineers will be interested in production. So the production management will happen within the production and production planning function. So that will allow all of these different activities within that function. Then you'd have something like quality management or plant maintenance. And for my perspective, being a supply chain person, we usually use materials management. It looks at the entire flow of materials from the point of procuring to the usage. So you will have the bill of materials, you will have the materials requirement planning, and all of these functions will be embedded within the materials management process. And on the downstream side, you will have the sales and distribution side. The sales and distribution side basically looks at how the distribution happens towards the latter part of the supply chain, how the customer can buy this. And the accounting side is basically, it is something that sits across like this. In this diagram that you here, what we have here, you can see that this is basically overarching the entire list of different functions that are there. Because everything that is done in an organization, there will be financial implications. And you will have to have accounting, you will have to have auditing. There will be investment requirements, there will be treasury requirements. So basically, finance and controlling, sometimes in SAP, this is called as FICO or FICO. FICO is usually the code name that is used by a lot of SAP users and consultants. So FICO generally is an overarching thing that sort of monitors the activities within each of these functional silos. And then we have, like I mentioned, that the logistics area is very large because that's basically something that connects the major activities within the organization. But in addition to that, there are other activities that are peripheral and supportive to the business, such as human resources or human capital management, things like that. So generally what we have is, we have a workflow which is connecting all of these different functions within the organization. And then we have an overarching FICO overview, which connects the expenditures, the finances that are there. So this is basically the fundamental layout that is there. So most of the time when, let's say, for example, an engineer or a professional or even someone who's operative grade worker joins the organization, what happens is they will most probably be focusing on one of these particular silos. So for example, maybe a chemical engineer who might be joining could be working in production planning. If you take a transport and logistics graduate, they might be working in materials management or sales and distribution. So that arm will have some activities associated with that. So that's basically how the structure works. So you don't, I mean, it's so large, it's very difficult to get people who will understand the functions of all these functions. So you will become an expert or you will become a area specialist in one of these. So before I got into academia, I used to work in SAP sector as a consultant for one of the companies that are internationally focusing on AFS apparel and fashion related implementations. And my area was materials management. So I was basically looking at the entire materials management area from the point of finding vendors, sourcing, creating vendors, creating bill of materials, creating purchase orders, and how to ensure the flow of materials, all of these things. I think one of the other important things we need to mention is like in this day and age, a lot of people talk about programming. They are very interested about the programming side. So especially for the benefit of the IT people who would be watching this video. So the underlying SAP, the coding is done through a language called ABAP. ABAP stands for something that I can't exactly remember off the top of my head, but it's basically something that is only used in SAP. So they have their own language that is used for that. But it's loosely based on Java. So anyone who has good coding skills can easily understand it. And if they master it, there are lots of opportunities in SAP, because ABAP, it's very hard to find really good ABAP consultants, because most of the computer science people, they tend to go with the more mainstream languages. So that's basically the structure that is there. And of course, now I also want to touch a little bit about the SAP User Interface. So we have something called IMG. IMG is called the implementation guide. So what happens is, when a company wants to have an SAP system installed or implemented, is the more technical term, they get consultants on board. So a lot of consultants that are, there are lots of Indian companies that are implementing a lot of stuff in Sri Lanka. India has a lot of companies that are focusing in the SAP landscape, especially because of the Silicon Valley in Bengaluru. So what happens is, these implementation people, they have access to something that many regular users don't have. So if you are a consultant, or if you are someone called a super users, companies would sometimes have a super user. So those people will be the only people who have access to the implementation guide. So what happens here is, you set up the architecture of the organization. How many suppliers are there? How is the flow of information going? How is it connected? What is the organizational structure? Which department is reporting to which department? How is the connectivity between different departments? If you have an engineering department and a procurement department, how is that connected to the overall organization? If you take a large company with multiple factories, how do they connect together? And all of these things are basically set up in this implementation guide. So only a few people have access to this. Usually consultants are given access, and every organization that runs SAP will have a few super users. They will have that full access. So in addition to that, what we will have is regular transactions that you can do. So one of the examples that I've given is like what happens is, when you are a regular employee in an organization, you will be restricted to only a few transactions, such a transaction under material. If you want to buy a certain chemical from Germany, you will have to create a new vendor, if that is a new supplier. So then you have to basically go and create your own vendor, and only the people with the relevant access can do it. Not everyone can do it. And then sometimes what happens is, especially if it is an operational level thing, you will only have operational level access. So someone who's a buying officer or a merchandise, or someone will maybe only have access to creating purchase orders. So the purchase order will be done through the system, and every activity that is done has what we call a transaction code. So in this cage here, which is denoted by 1, you have to type the transaction code. So usually you have to, there's a process. So if you want to create a new window, you have to start with \n and type in the transaction code. So as you would have guessed, purchase orders, the transaction code is ME21N. So then you have to select the relevant vendor. So let's say we created a vendor through this create vendor function. We can put the vendor, there will be a document date, and based on the vendor and other factors, there will be various things that are automatically picked up to the system. What is the purchase organization? Where is this going to be used? Which factory? Company code will basically denote what factory. So let's say if you are taking a Sri Lankan example, if MAS is doing central purchasing, if they are having a factory in Mawatagama, they will, if they are buying for that, there will be a code like this. If it's an international organization, let's say based out of Germany, they are buying from the central office to a plant in Romania or somewhere, the relevant company code will be popping up based on how the implementation is done. So then what happens is, you need to select what material you want to buy. So there are possibilities. The vendor might be selling multiple materials. There are cases where vendor might be selling just one material. So if there are multiple materials sold by the vendor, you have to select the relevant materials and the quantity. So when we are setting up the materials in the system, the measurement system is usually given. So here it will be pallet, it can be eachers, it can be different measurement units. So all of that will be displayed in this bottom area along with the currency. And when the purchase order is created, also sometimes, based on how you implement it, you will have a situation where you have to share this to your management. Management has to approve it, so that you can bring in such safety measures so that employees can't also do things out of their own volition without being without having the approval of the management. But in a manual system, of course, they can do anything. They might be able to get bypass these different things, but here you can't do it, because you can, if you want to have good control, you can actually put a lot of what you call checks and balances into the system. So I hope this sort of gives you a good understanding about some of the features. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I hope that gives you a basic understanding of some of the key features.
Yes, of course. The purpose of this video was also that to provide the introduction, and I hope we discuss a lot of details about, initial details about SAP systems. In most of the videos in our YouTube channel, we are focusing on especially fresh and young professionals, as well as the undergraduates who are willing to join within next few years, willing to join with the industries. So if you are, you might be a chemical engineer or going to be a chemical engineer, or sometimes you might be a mechanical engineer, or maybe electrical engineer, computer engineer, as well as transportation engineers, or maybe supply chain executives, or any other post. Your position would be, your duties and your area of expertise would be different. But I hope you clearly understood that through SAP systems, we all integrate all these areas of expertise are integrated into one system, and through the system, everything is managed. So it's really important for you, whatever your specialty area, you should have a certain knowledge, sound understanding about this system to perform in a better way in the industry. So we discuss, I hope we laid the foundation for a future discussion in depth about taking, because in this video we are not showing off the SAP user interfaces that much, but I hope through Dr. Nilas's explanation you got sound understanding about how it really works in the real applications. So as a final remark, so we have reached to the end of this discussion. As a final remarks, I would like to know from Dr. Nilas, because most of the audience in this YouTube channel also related to sustainability development and resource planning, and might be some people who are especially in life cycle assessment related areas. In fact, I would say circular economy based fields. So they would be very much interested to know how these SAP systems in industries, how they are going to help these kind of new concepts like circular economy, life cycle assessment, and resource planning. We call it something called waste minimization and resource efficiency in the industry. So nowadays, these are the hot topics with the supply chain industry also, I guess. So I think the people would be much more interested to know how their knowledge of SAP system would help these fields. So I invite you to explain a little bit as final remark on that matter.
Yeah, so I think in general, to my understanding, what we can utilize SAP is basically they will have all the data that is there. So this will be a really good input to building a really good circular economy or for life cycle assessment, because the entirety of the data within the system can be captured here. So to the best of my knowledge, they are recent, SAP's recent pushes have mostly been towards making their business a lot more sustainable. So they have tried to bring in the cloud technology so that they reduce the wastage, and they have tried to align to the circular economy concepts so that they reuse the various resources that are there and they become energy efficient. But they are mostly being focusing on allowing the users, the companies, to gather the data and plug it into whatever decision making, so that the decision making process is much more better. And I think one of the things that we need to understand here, of course, is that most of these companies that are working really well in the sustainability spectrum, especially these European organizations, run SAP. And because they have that capability built within SAP to gather all the data, they know how much is used, how much is in inventory, what is the production, how much is it costing, what is the wastage. All of that information is here. That is a really good way that can, that is a really good input for them to take better and more responsible decisions which lead to sustainable business operations. So essentially, that's the focus that they are having. And also SAP is now, they are trying to have real-time computing. So they want to have real-time decision-making capability, so that the business decision maker knows the data right at this second. Every second things are updated so that they can take better decisions. So their recent pushers have all been, basically trying to come to that sustainability point by empowering the user. And very recently they launched something called SAP Leonardo. SAP Leonardo, the name is inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. So SAP Leonardo is also about how to integrate these Industry 4.0 technologies into the business. So they can bring in things like Internet of Things and all of these things, so that at the end of the day, the business sustainability works really well. So this is basically, I mean, what they are doing. I mean, if you look at these industry solutions that they are having, they have a set of different industry solutions, and all of these, you can see they are different to each other. So they have different platforms. If you take agribusiness, you can look at the chemical usage in those things. If you take railways, you can use how much diesel or electricity, if it's electric trains, are used. I mean, if you look at, say, finance, you can look at the usage of documents and things like that. So all of these different sectors will have its own metrics that can be embedded into the system. And another small thing, SAP is also versatile, because if, let's say, for example, someone is going to install SAP chemicals, let's say there's a chemical company that wants to install this. They recognize that one of their features is not there in SAP. So what they can do is they can ask the consultants or the implementation team to provide them that facility. So what happens then is the consultants do, they gather the information and they will build an add-on to SAP, so that those things can be taken care of within the system itself. So these are usually called Z transactions. So anyone who would have used SAP, if you type in a transaction starting with the letter Z or Z, that means that's a customized transaction that has been made uniquely for that organization. So one of the other beauties of this technology of SAP is, you can customize it according to the industry requirement, so that you can bring in more, more versatility into the system. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. So I hope, it really explained, Dr. Nilas clearly explained how all these fields are, integrated together, and how decision making is possible. So something called, nowadays, the life cycle assessment and related circular economy concepts are really expanding and developing. So we need a real-time analysis. Now, normally, good old days, the life cycle assessment is, we just collect the data and we have non-real-time studies. So based on that, we go for decision making, but it's really dynamic in a real application. So we should have real-time life cycle analysis, real-time sustainability analysis to fine-tune our business operations towards sustainability with the changes that may occur, the variations that may occur while it's operating. So for that purpose, I think SAP systems really helps us not only finding the data, but also to manage the systems towards that aspects, towards that goal. So I hope this introductory video was a very good one for you. So if anyone is interested in this area, we hope to have more in-depth video in future. But I hope this one provided you the knowledge that are required for you to be comfortable when you join with industries where SAP systems are functioning, how to work with them, what is actually happening inside. I hope these things now it's clear for you. So I would like to thank a lot for Dr. Nilas Pereira, who was the resource person for today's tech talk with me. Thank you very much, Dr. Nilas. And amidst of your tight schedules, we were able to do this great video for our future generations to further get knowledgeable on these areas. So that's the objective of our YouTube channel too. So thank you very much to all of you, and we will meet with another video, a tech talk like this with a different resource person. So until we meet with that, have a nice day, and goodbye to all of you. Goodbye to Dr. Nilas too.
Thank you. Goodbye.